This is Southern Cross News with Joe Palmer.
Good evening everyone and welcome to Southern Cross News. A Deloraine man has been sentenced to 3.5 years in prison for shooting an 11-year-old girl in the head. Nathan Richard Campbell was last week found guilty of causing grievous bodily harm to Phoenix Newitt in August 2017.
The family of Nathan Richard Campbell walking into court once more as the 26-year-old faced his judgment. It was here in Stag Court in August last year where Campbell fired a rifle at a parked car, critically injuring young Phoenix Newitt. Last week the trial heard the incident started at the Deloraine Woolworths, where Phoenix's mother Sarah and Campbell's partner Brianna Mansell had a verbal fight. They then drove separately to Stag Court where the argument continued, culminating in Campbell firing the rifle at the car. Today, that was described by the judge as a reckless single act in the heat of the moment. The court also heard Phoenix continues to live with pieces of the bullet remaining in her head and heart. Campbell was sentenced to 3.5 years in prison. He'll have to serve at least half of that before he's eligible for parole. Phoenix Newitt's family was not present at sentencing, while Campbell's family had little to say as they left court. His lawyer says his client has accepted his punishment.
Mr Campbell regrets deeply the injuries that were sustained by Phoenix Newitt back in August of 2017. It was never his intention that she would be harmed or that anyone would be harmed on that night. Mr Campbell accepts the verdict of the jury, he respects it. He will not be filing an appeal in relation to either the conviction or the penalty upon my instructions.
In sentencing, Justice Robert Pearce said he accepted that Campbell was remorseful and that his actions were uncharacteristic, but added a strong message needed to be sent to the community about the reckless use of firearms. Sean McComish, Southern Cross News.
Closing arguments have been heard in the trial of a man accused of failing to report a killing. Robert William Broad has pleaded not guilty after the remains of Tyson Timothy Clark Robertson were found at his Mayfield home last year. In his evidence today, Mr Broad maintained he had no idea Mr Clark had been killed, despite the court hearing evidence to the contrary. Mr Broad had also found a suspected grave on the property. The case has been adjourned until tomorrow. A third person has been charged in relation to a violent home invasion in Deloraine last Friday. The 38-year-old from Blessington fronted the Launceston Magistrates Court this morning, charged with aggravated burglary and aggravated armed robbery. 45-year-old Mandy Jones and 36-year-old Philip Milburn, both from Perth, appeared in court yesterday facing the same charges. The alleged incident involving a baseball bat left a 56-year-old man with head and face injuries as well as bruising to his body. All three will reappear separately in court at a later time. The reinstatement of Tasmania's only low-cost abortion clinic has been delayed once again. The service was meant to be up and running by the end of October, but today the Premier says he hopes it will be available by the end of the year.
Almost a year after Tasmania's only low-cost abortion clinic closed, the Premier today admitted he doesn't know exactly when its replacement will open or start taking patients.
We've endeavoured to restore a facility that closed for commercial reasons, to restore that and to have the service available to Tasmanian women as soon as possible.
The government promised to have a new provider available in Hobart by October, but after failing to meet his own deadline, the Premier is describing it as a hope that it will be ready by the end of the year.
Well, look, that is certainly our hope within that time frame. We've struck an agreement with the provider. It's now necessary for them to find suitable premises and secure an agreement with those premise providers to commence the facility operating.
Many women have already been forced to travel to Melbourne for the procedure, with no low-cost local clinic available. The government today facing backlash for not acting sooner.
There are women who would have been relying on this service being available in October, who are waiting for this service to be available. For many women, it's not a choice that they can make to travel to Melbourne to access this service.
They're angry, they're upset, it's actually traumatised them. The actual procedure hasn't traumatised them, it's actually been the process to get the procedure.
The government has offered an assistance scheme for women travelling to the mainland for treatment in the meantime. Michelle WISBEY, Southern Cross News.
A man has been injured on a council work site in New Norfolk. The contractor was working on the waterfront revitalisation project this morning when the incident happened. He was taken to hospital with what's believed to be non-life-threatening injuries. The exact details of what happened haven't been released. WorkSafe Tasmania says it's responding to the incident. Public sector unions have vowed to keep escalating industrial action in demand of higher wages, releasing their next round of protest plans today. More than 7,000 public servants took part in strikes across the state last month, but the Premier is not backing down on his 2% wages cap. New action will include WorkSafe Tasmania staff banning the issuing of infringement notices and limiting the number of breathalyzers available to police.
We will continue to escalate actions. We'll be talking to members next week about stop work meetings and about strike actions. This campaign will continue until this government sees sense and sits down and bargains in good faith.
We are serious about ensuring we provide Tasmanian public servants with good work conditions, a good pay increase, and want to negotiate with the unions in good faith. But they are showing bad faith by encouraging this sort of behaviour.
Negotiation meetings between the two parties yesterday once again failed to reach any agreement. A new proposal is set to see Hobart's long-standing Welcome Stranger Hotel transformed into a residential and retail hub. The plan aims to accommodate the city's growing population, and it will also see the removal of pokie machines from the CBD.
Welcoming plans for the Welcome Stranger. The $30 million revamp will feature 52 apartments and public retail space, connecting Harrington and Davey Streets.
The proposal will see a mixture of residential and commercial spaces developed, and as part of that there'll be a fairly substantial walk-through area for the public.
The HEXA Group development is set to create around 100 jobs and aims to address the city's housing shortage.
It puts roofs over Tasmanians' heads, and that's what we're all about here. It provides great opportunities for employment, apprentices. It gives back to the greater economies.
As part of the development, the pub's 24 poker machines will be removed.
There is no actual need for the pokies to remain in this particular facility. I guess what we're trying to do is mature the site and take account of what many Hobart people or visitors to Hobart are looking for.
A wine bar, cafe and providor will form a community hub within the complex, the building reaching up to the maximum recommended for the site in Hobart's height standards.
Really, we're sitting within a discretionary use at 45 metres, but it's probably about mid-range with many of the other buildings that we've identified.
Certainly we didn't want a glass building that didn't have any relationship to the existing built context. And then the tower form of taller stepped forms then relates to more of the height within Macquarie Street and the adjacent context.
The proposal will be submitted to the Hobart City Council by Friday, with construction to begin in 2020 subject to approval. Ruby COMMANE, Southern Cross News.
The state government is assuring the public negotiations between Tasmanian Quality Meats and JBS regarding a takeover of the Devonport abattoir are on track. The decision by JBS to close the facility meant more than 100 Tasmanian workers were facing job losses. TQM will now operate the plant from November 15, which could see it continue to process pork for at least the next 12 months. The government says it's also working closely with key players regarding the future of the industry. One of Tasmania's peak tourism roads will benefit from a $2 million upgrade this summer to keep up with rising visitor numbers. A new overtaking lane will be added to the busy Tasman Highway near Swansea, with other improvements coming at Beaumaris and 4 Mile Creek. Roadworks will also start soon to improve roads at Newbina and to seal the Hastings Cave Road in the far south.
It's visitor infrastructure that enables this economy to grow. And I think hopefully that's the kind of the model we can, this will be the start of a long-term investment program that happens in tourism infrastructure and visitor roads across the state.
It also supports our locals as well and our residents, and they have been consulted as we embark across the next 5 years of the $72 million investment.
Investment into roads in the Tarkine and on Bruny Island are also expected to be announced at a later date. Tasmanian firefighters are rallying around a colleague injured while fighting a bushfire in 2016. Robert Boost is continuing to receive treatment after being hit in the head by a falling branch. But now the government's insurance provider is knocking back claims for treatment recommended by his specialists.
In February 2016, Robert Boost was deployed to help contain bushfires in Tasmania's southwest wilderness. But while working as a remote area team firefighter, a tree branch fell and struck him on the head.
Since then, Robert's been suffering chronic pain and chronic migraines.
The 35-year-old has 2 children and a wife. During his recovery, some of his treatment has been covered by the fire services insurer, LYNCH. But now the union says it's knocking back claims for pain management treatments, including $30,000 ketamine infusions and the trial of a neurostimulator.
They're saying that the advice that they've received from their specialist is that the ketamine treatment is no longer required.
The Tasmania Fire Service says it's working to provide appropriate welfare support to him while managing the workers' compensation claim within the parameters of the legislation. Allianz also saying it's being handled in accordance with the Tasmanian workers' compensation laws.
It is deeply concerning that there is a Tasmanian firefighter, a worker, who was injured in the course of his work and is now having to jump through hoops like this to try and fund his own medical treatment.
The union says the case is worrying for its member firefighters, who now fear their medical costs won't be adequately covered if they're injured on the job.
They want to know, if they're going out there constantly putting themselves in risk, if it's a wildfire, a structure fire, that they've got that coverage, that their family's going to be looked after if something does happen to them.
But as Mr Boost and his supporters challenge the decision in a tribunal, they've set up a GoFundMe page. It's already raised $20,000 as Tasmanians help someone who's served for the community. Michael Breen, Southern Cross News.
Tasmanians returning home from the INVICTUS Games are promising to keep the spirit of the global spectacle alive. Along with collecting a raft of medals, local competitors say they're now a part of a worldwide family committed to looking out for one another.
The smile on Matt Brumby's face says it all. He clutches INVICTUS Games gold from the global contest for returned servicemen and women recently held in Sydney. But the reward runs far deeper.
What it does is it puts everybody under a big umbrella where they all feel safe again.
Brumby is a paraplegic after a pocket of fluid formed inside his spinal cord during his time in the Navy. As co-captain of the Aussie side, he saw how strongly the Games united those who served.
I think it meant everything. The fact that they could feel like they're doing something for their country again.
Along with medals in the cycling and track events, Brumby says his greatest gold came from the battlefield of wheelchair rugby. He says the sentimental support for the Aussie underdogs spurred on his great group of mates. Such was his enjoyment of the Games, the 40-year-old is already back in training for the 2020 edition.
And I know that from every competitor on the Australian team and the other nations were so grateful. The fact that everybody turned out, and it wasn't just a little turnout, the stands were packed.
Latrobe's Jared Kent is also preparing for another shot on the INVICTUS stage after setting personal bests in all 5 of his events. His legacy from the Games will be helping other returned servicemen and women with their mental health, something he spoke about one-on-one with the Games founder, Prince Harry.
The INVICTUS spirit is unconquered. People now have another perception of what's going on behind the scenes or even in their own lives.
He will start with a speaking tour of local schools before spreading his message much further.
And I'm going to dedicate my life to hopefully, helping other people get through these things.
Tom Johnson, Southern Cross News.
There's a changing of the guard for Tasmania's vulnerable pets, with the Dogs Home of Tasmania now set to run at Launceston Shelter and Pound. The welfare organisation is taking over from the RSPCA.
Hopefully we'll increase the rate of dog adoption by bringing our program up north. If we weren't here, then I'd hate to think what would happen to these dogs. So we're ensuring the best welfare of dogs in Tasmania so they can enjoy a family life and a happy life.
The RSPCA says it's now focusing on inspecting services and protection of animals. And with the warmer weather on its way, a Tasmanian snake expert is urging people not to let slithering reptiles deter them from enjoying the outdoors.
Occasionally they turn up in people's yards and while they're seeking out mice and frogs and things. And I guess the message is that snakes are just a normal part of the bush, and there's no need to be terrified of them. If you just give them room to move away, they generally always will.
The copperhead is one of 3 snake species in Tasmania, with sightings particularly common in the Tamar Valley region. Now let's take a look at the day's business and finance news with thanks to Tasplan, your local super fund. The Australian share market closed higher on a choppy day's trading as investors awaited the result of the US midterm election, buoyed by banking and energy stocks. The ASX 200 index has risen by 21.7 points. And a short time ago, the Australian dollar was trading at 72.5 US cents and 82.06 Japanese yen.
Rain has delayed much of the day's play in Tasmania's Sheffield Shield clash against New South Wales. George Bailey lost his wicket on the first ball of the session, with the Tigers managing to add just 7 runs before the heavens opened. The match appears destined to be a draw, with Tasmania trailing by 327 runs in its first innings, with 1 day of play remaining. And Tasmania's women's team has trained ahead of 2 50-over matches in the National League. After a drought-breaking win over the ACT in late September, the Tigers will host Queensland down South Australia later this week at the TCA ground. English World Cup player Alex Hartley will join the side.
And I think we've got it as a good time because she's got a bit of fire in her belly. She knows that she's got some competitions that she'll want to play in again internationally.
I'd say we're in a really good place at the moment. Obviously getting that first win against ACT gave us confidence and just showed the work that we've been doing really paid off in that match.
The games are on Friday and Saturday at 10 a.m. The Launceston Cycling Festival inaugural running challenge has attracted some big names, with World Athletics champion Josh Harris signing up for the 5-kilometre race. The event is aimed at top-level athletes.
We've seen riders such as Chris Froome, Richie Port taking part in this over the years, so we've got a really high-class field again this year, but it's not just about the elites. We've got junior races earlier on in the day.
The handicap format means that any single runner in the race has a really good shot at it, so I think it's going to be really fair to all the runners.
The foot race will be held as a curtain raiser to the main cycling event being held this Sunday.
Good evening. Temperatures continued the recent trend of sitting below average, up by 5 degrees below today. Hobart, Burnie and Devonport 16 degrees, Launceston 17. The top was just 18 at St Helens and Friendly Beaches. Flinders Island, Smithton and Low Head had 15. King Island, Grove, Ouse and Strawn 14. Lyawini 7. A few showers over the west, scattered elsewhere during the day, all from this low-level convective cloud that swept over the state today. A large band of cloud with embedded thunderstorms extends from the Kimberley right over towards New Zealand. Open cell cumulus cloud moves over southern South Australia and Victoria. Tomorrow, a high extends a ridge over most of the country except coastal parts of WA, the NT and Queensland. The wind still chilly from the west-southwest and at 15 to 25 knots, becoming more westerly during the morning and variable over the east coast, swells to 4 metres. A strong wind warning in the northeast, including all of Flinders Island down to St Helens Point. The central northern Midlands should be on the lookout for some frost as well. And for tomorrow, Hobart can expect a shower or two. 16 degrees, 15 the top for Cygnet, 15 the high for New Norfolk with a shower or two about. Partly cloudy for Launceston, 17 after a cool night, 15 for Devonport. Early frost for Campbelltown, warming up to 15 degrees. A shower or two for Burnie, 15 the top, 14 for Strahan, showers 2 for Smithton, 15, and for St Helens tomorrow, partly cloudy and 17, 16 for Swansea and Fingal. UV sitting at a high 7. On Friday, showers over the west and north, extending statewide for a period. Fine on Saturday, apart from a shower over the west, far south and Bass Strait. Another shower for the west and far south on Sunday, fine for the rest of Tasmania. Mostly sunny and 26 in Perth tomorrow. Partly cloudy over Adelaide and Melbourne, an early shower in Sydney. Showers forecast for Brisbane and a storm on the cards for Darwin. Partly cloudy at the moment, 12 degrees in Hobart, Launceston 13, Devonport. Bit of sunshine and 12 degrees. Joe, in the Melbourne Cup, I missed by that much, but I've got the Oaks winner for you. It's a horse named just after you. Very elegant.
What do you want? Thank you very much, Murph. That's all from the team for now. We'll see you a bit later with updates. Bye-bye.